I am thrilled to be with you today. Well, don't take that too personally. It's not really you. I'm thrilled to be with anyone after the last number of months and the crazy year that we've had. But I'm especially happy to be here. I know that we are, I think I learned a new term that we're phygital. Is that right? That we're both physical and digital. And so I want to welcome all of you online. I'm so glad that you're with us, and I'm glad that you're here for the conclusion of the conference. But I am especially grateful to all of you here, my new FILO friends that I've gotten to meet in person. I've enjoyed the interactions that we've had and the time that we've been together in the last day and a half. I will not recognize you later when we have our masks off, but I still think we've made some really good personal connections, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. I spend my life working with leaders and teams, helping them be more effective and fulfilled. And so I've chosen to spend my time with you talking about something that they all hate. How's that sound? Busy work. Right? Maybe that's not a great idea. Maybe that's not the way you should choose your topic for a keynote address, because just hearing busy work, I know, affects us viscerally. You hear that and you kind of unconsciously groan and start rolling your eyes. Some of you are doing it right now. And I can appreciate that, because busy work is universally despised and debilitating. Nobody likes busy work. We've all experienced it. It has a way of sort of limiting us or making us lesser versions of ourselves. It's discouraging, right? It's the ultimate initiative and innovation killer, and it's like a volunteer repellent. If you want to wear your team members out and drive your volunteers away, just serve them a steady diet of busy work. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Okay, good. You're my people, all right? We're together in this, and we all understand that busy work stinks. But what is it exactly? Think about it. People use the term busy work to talk about all kinds of things, all kinds of activities, big things, small things, things that take a long time, things that are relatively short. It's really hard to figure out what they're talking about. What is it? What activity is busy work? And I think that's hard, because busy work is really less about what you're doing than why you're doing it. People use the term busy work to talk about anything that seems like the purpose is lacking, any time where the return doesn't seem worthy of the investment, where the outcome doesn't seem worth the inputs, when the juice isn't worth the squeeze. It's any time that you feel like whatever it is that you're achieving isn't worth all that blood, sweat, and tears, and talent and toil that you're putting in to achieve it. You've been there, you know what that feels like? When we recognize that the purpose is anemic, we just sort of struggle. Now, I think that's because God made us that way. He built us and all humans to be creatures of conviction. What I mean by that is he built us to run on a sense of purpose, right? And it's like the fuel that we need. And when we run out of it, well, we don't run very well for very long. Years ago, a man discovered this. His name was Viktor Frankl, and he was actually a prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp during World War II. He wrote about his experiences in a book called Man's Search for Meaning. You may have read it, or you may want to pick it up later. And he wrote about being in this camp and trying to figure out what was it that made the difference between life and death. It was a bit baffling, because he noticed that sometimes a young person would perish, but an old person would persist. A strong person might die, but a weak person would live. And it didn't seem to make any sense. And he kept observing this until he hit upon the crux of the matter, and it was all about purpose. When people had a sense of purpose, some overarching thing that they believed in, they could invest in, it gave them the ability to transcend the immediate experiences they were having, and they survived. But when somebody lacked that overarching sense of purpose, it was like they were overwhelmed by their immediate toils and terrors of being in that place, and they often perished. Now, in the less dire environments of your churches and your teams, The same principle still applies. When people have a strong sense of purpose, well, it's like they're strong too, and they're able to do great things and persist and endure. But when they find that the purpose is lacking or anemic, well, they start breaking down. They burn out and leave. Or worse, they burn out and stay. Contrary to popular opinion, people don't burn out from too much to do, but from too little reason to do it. They need a sense of purpose in order to keep moving forward and keep giving themselves to the task. So if you want to pump up your people, you've got to pump up the purpose. You've got to give them a good reason to do what they're doing. If you want to transform busy work into worthy work, you have to draw their attention to a compelling purpose. Think of it this way. If you want your people to be their best and give their best, then you've got to help them understand that what they're doing is ultimately accomplishing something that's worthy of their best. It's all about harnessing the power of purpose. So I've got a few minutes with you, and I want to give you a couple ideas of things that you can do to harness the power of purpose in your teams, whether you're the leader of the team or another team member, so that you can help transform busy work into worthy work. All right, it's going to be easy to keep track of what I'm saying. I've just got two major practices I want to introduce to you. The first one is going to be easy. Get ready to write it down. It's don't be shy of the why. I know it rhymes. It's kind of cute, right? That's the kind of thing that people like me say on stages like this so that you'll remember it. And I know it's sticky, so you won't forget. So don't be shy about the why. You know, at the center of any sort of collaboration, anytime leaders and teams are interacting together, three questions sort of swirl around. That's, what are we doing? How are we going to do it? And why should we do it? What, how, and why? But of these three, why is by far the shyest. What and how are noisy by nature. I mean, they're boisterous. They're always pushing their way into things. They're prominent in to-do lists and timesheets and everything. You can't miss them, and they're always commanding attention. But why is it's like a wallflower. It sits over there in the corner of the room, waiting for someone to invite it into the conversation. Now, that's dangerous. It's dangerous that why is so shy, because look, what and how might be the wheels of your organization's or your team's progress, but why is that fuel on which its people run? And so if why doesn't enter the conversation, it's really easy for it to get drowned out altogether. In fact, it's insidious that sometimes this thing that your team members need more than anything else to thrive is so fragile and easily put off by the din of the work itself. In fact, it's easy, if you're not careful, for the work to eclipse the worth. And in that situation, you'll find that you feel productive but purposeless, and that's a dangerous situation. That's a recipe for burnout. So if you want to prevent that, that means that you need to spend more time levering why into the conversation. You want to get it into the mix. Don't be content to let it sit over to the side. Oh, what and how will get their due. I mean, you can't delegate tasks or talk about specific engagements without talking about what and how, but it's up to you to get why into the mix. So talk about it every chance you get. Don't ever give a what or a how without actually tagging up to a why at the same time. Just make sure that it's always part of the conversation. Because look, it's your ability to elevate the why and make sure that people pay attention to it that helps people separate what they're doing from what they're accomplishing. You know, those aren't the same things. It helps them separate the tasks that are in front of them immediately from the things that they're ultimately accomplishing. And more importantly, when you elevate the why, it allows people to see what they're doing in the context of a more compelling purpose. And that has the ability to transform the experience and to change those tasks from busy work into worthy work. I saw this in action not too long ago. I was in Monterrey, Mexico, and I was touring a big plant. One of my corporate clients happens to be a big tire maker. And we're in one of these gigantic plants. Our group is slowly walking through the plant, kind of taking in all these things. And we came up to this one station where there was this one guy working really hard. And among the things he was doing, he was moving pelletized rubber from here to here. I mean, he was doing a few other things, but he just kept coming back to moving pelletized rubber from here to here. Now, pelletized rubber is just little pieces of rubber that are ultimately put together, melted down, and they become tires. But he was just doing this highly repetitive task of moving pelletized rubber from here to here, just to go back and move pelletized rubber from here to here. Look, you're getting the feeling just with me pantomiming it here. But when I saw this, I thought, oh, this is like a mind-numbing job. This is the epitome of busy work. But this guy didn't look like he knew that. I mean, he was fired up. He was even kind of humming a little song to himself, and he was doing this. And it really caught my interest. So as the group moved on, I kind of held back, and I said to him, hey, man, you look like you love your job. And he said, I do. It's a great job. And I pushed a little more, and I said, well, why do you love it so much? And he said, well, I just feel like it matters, and I like that. Okay, now he has my attention. I said, well, why does it matter? And he said, well, it matters because this step is really important in the process inside the plant and all. But honestly, I find myself all the time thinking about how it matters outside the plant. I asked him to tell me more about it, and he said, well, like this morning, I was thinking about when I was a little kid, and we used to go on trips with the family. We'd go on these road trips. He said we had this enormous car. It was back in the days when cars were so big they had like a back dashboard, a really wide space under the back window, and it was during the years when seatbelts were just kind of decorative, and so he and his brother would climb into the back window, and they'd lie there on that dashboard, and he told me about watching the clouds and the shapes of those and watching the trees whizzing by, and he said, those were the best memories. Those were great times for my brother and me. They were great times for our family. I mean, it just really brought us together, and he said, this morning, that's what I was thinking about, is how I have a big part in helping families come together and build memories like that. I was speechless. I mean, you realize what's going on here. I saw him moving pelletized rubber from here to here, to go back and move pelletized rubber again from here to here, but that's not what he saw. He saw that his work was instrumental in actually helping families have these great memories and build these sorts of connections like he and his brother had and all of that. And that transformed the potential busy work of these routine, potentially mundane and uninspired tasks into the worthy work of making that kind of contribution. Does that make sense? Well, I'll share one more example with you. I wasn't sure I'd share this with you, but it happened to me on the way up here. And maybe it just struck me this way because I was anticipating sharing these ideas with you. But I was driving up here from my home in Tennessee. And partway up here, I stopped for gas near the Corvette Museum in Kentucky. And there's a big Corvette dealership there. And I hopped out of my truck to put gas in it. And I kind of jumped down and go over there and put gas in it. And as I'm starting to kind of do that, this guy pulls up in just a brand spanking new Corvette. He got out and he kind of put the nozzle of the gas tank in there and leaned against the car like he was tired. And I thought I'd just make conversation with him. So I said, hey, man, must be cool to drive a car like that. And he looked back at me, just hardly any life in him at all. And he said, nah, it's just a job. And I said, well, what kind of job is it? And he said, well, I prep these things for people, for the museum, and I prep them to like sell the stuff. So I come up here and I put gas in it, and then I take it back and get another one. I come up, put gas in that, and I take it back. And I'm listening to him describe his job. It doesn't sound like a job to me. It sounds more like a sentence, right? This is not anything that he's enjoying, and you can just tell he's depleted from it, just doing it again and again. And we chatted for another couple minutes, and he got back in the car, and he drove away back to wherever he came from, I guess another day in the salt mines, right? Well, I walked over and I finished pumping my gas. I put it in and I kind of hopped over and jumped up in the car, and I realized, a big difference in my behavior and my experience and his. You know, we were both doing the same thing. I mean, we were both pumping gas into our vehicles and all, but clearly he was having a different experience than I was because, you know, what he was accomplishing had nothing to do with a worthy why. He was just doing the job, filling it up with gas to go fill it up with gas again, and correspondingly, it just was busy work, depleting and mind-numbing. But you know, when I was putting gas in my vehicle, it was a whole different thing because you know why I was doing it? I was doing it to get to you. Right? I was excited about being here. I saw pumping gas, as menial and simple as that is, I saw pumping gas as instrumental to the great purpose of getting to be here and experience FILO and connect with all of you. And as a result, I was kind of skipping around as if pumping gas is one of my favorite things on earth. Right? I think you get the point. That if you want to transform busy work into worthy work, you can't be shy about the why. You've got to lever it into the conversation. You have to make it as big as you can because in your job, you've got your own rubber to move. You've got your own gas to pump. You've got to-do lists full of things that in and of themselves may not be particularly inspiring, but your ability to look past those or your ability to pitch a really compelling why and a worthy purpose enables people to see those things in the context of a compelling why. And it can transform those things from busy work into worthy work. Well, as you get this idea that the secret of transforming busy work into worthy work is really all about harnessing the power of purpose, I want to throw one more thing at you. So the first idea was to not be shy about the why. The second thing I want to talk about has to do with how you motivate people. How you motivate your team. And I want to encourage you to motivate on the worth load, not the workload. Motivate on the worth load, not the workload. See, there's this interesting thing about being creatures of conviction, and that is that we roam around all the time kind of with a calculator going, where we're trying to decide what we're going to do based on what we find worthy of our efforts. We want to engage the sorts of things that are worthy of us. So we're always calculating what it's going to cost and what we're going to get out of it. It's like we're thinking about the investment, we're thinking about the return or the cost and the value. You get where I'm going here? And what we're ultimately looking for is a good deal. A situation where the equation is imbalanced. Well, it might be balanced, but we're hoping for it to be imbalanced, where it's in the interest of getting more for what we give. Now, marketers aren't oblivious to this. You can see it in all kinds of advertising. I bumped into it the other day when I was up at the hour when all the infomercials come on. And instead of turning them off this time, I kind of dove into them. And I got to admit, it was kind of a new experience. I learned so much about like stain removal and slicing things and the wonders of nonstick cooking, okay? And because I stuck to it, at one point, I found myself just really impressed with all these pitchmen and pitchwomen that were selling these products. I mean, they were really good. I found myself thinking, you know, I really do need a fancy gizmo so that I can pull the weeds in my yard the correct way, right? Or, you know, I think I would be more fulfilled if my kitchen knives could saw a brick in half. Right? They were really getting to me. And in fact, at the end of this one advertisement for knives, they just about had me. I mean, I had my credit card ready because operators were standing by. And I was ready to do something about it. Now, here's the interesting thing. They got me to that point. They got me ready to move by showing me that it didn't cost very much. I mean, honestly, when I was doing that calculation, I wanted to move in that direction, not because I thought the knives were so great and so valuable, but because they had consistently reduced the cost until it was so low, I almost couldn't resist. It started at like $19.95. By the end, it was $9.95, and they just told me that if I act now, they'll throw in a whole new set for free, right? So you get where I'm going here. They created that equation to move me in that direction, not because I thought the knives were so great, but because the cost was so low. Now, that might be a great thing for online pitchmen and pitchwomen, because they don't have to worry about buyer's remorse. You know, they just want you to use your credit card and buy it. They're not really worried about any interaction after that. But those of you that are leaders, you're salespeople too. You're selling people on your ideas or the prospect of a great future. And when you're selling people on those things, you know, you can't afford for them to have buyer's remorse. It's not just this transaction, this motivation moment that matters, because you know there's going to be another one soon and another one after that. And somehow you have to worry about accidentally getting the work at the expense of the worth. So let me encourage you, when you want to move people to step into challenges, to rise to new things or make a big change, don't tell them why it won't cost very much. Tell them why it's worth everything they've got. Don't motivate them by working on the cost side of that equation. Instead, work on the value side and pump up the purpose, because when you can convince somebody that this is truly worthy, they'll give generously and enthusiastically of all their talents and their time, their energy and attention. And in so doing, you cultivate more than their actions and their work. You cultivate a sense of worth and purpose that sustains them and makes them strong and helps them persist. Well, my time's about up. So let me conclude by practicing what I preach. Let me model this a little bit for you by trying to pump up the purpose and reminding you that yours is truly worthy work. You're in a rough spot. Many of you are in thankless jobs. So let me start out by saying thanks, because you are probably pretty content that you're not up here where I'm standing. You'd just as soon be behind the booth, behind the wings, in the control room and all, and that's great because we need you there. But you know what's difficult about that? It means that you're in roles where the better you do your job, the less people realize there was even a job that needed to be done. You know that feeling? Well, I want to speak to that just for a minute and say thank you, because all those hours you spend or those times that you feel like you might not be recognized or invisible, those are really important things. All those things sitting in your to-do list that in and of themselves might not inspire you, or they might be very routine, where you're taping the stage, you're setting the cues, you're moving the lights, you're making sure the cord's right, you're moving equipment, you're preparing props. How much do all of you love when somebody like me says, hey, I'm going to need some props, right? All of those things that could be the tedious pieces of busy work in your day, they're not. They're important because they're not really just items on your to-do list. They're vital contributions to a universal spiritual battle. Does that sound a little crazy? Sound a little over dramatic, over the top? Maybe, but it's true. That's something we should talk about more often, because the fact that you're attending to those things is allowing somebody, some man or woman, to meet God or hear his voice for the first time this week. The fact that you were anticipating potential problems in the production or managing to avoid other hiccups that Satan could have used to distract them from what was being said or allow them to miss God's voice is vitally important. It's because of you that the conversation in the car going home was about what God wanted it to be about, rather than just another comment on how the music was too loud or the lights were misplaced or something like that. I just want for a moment to recognize and draw even your attention to the laudable purpose that's behind your everyday activity. I don't want to let the work eclipse the worth for this moment, because when you recognize that your attention to the graphics, to the technology, to the equipment, to the physical aspects, and a million other little tasks, when you realize that that's actually enabling people to more meaningfully connect with God and one another, well, that's a why that can redeem all that what and how that's filling your to-do list. It's the kind of purpose that can transform the busy work of having to be the first in and the last out into the worthy work of advancing Christ in his kingdom. So as we finish here now, we transition from my remarks into the finale, the celebration for this year's conference, and then we all head back home. my prayer for you is for big, wise, and worthy work. But I'd like to take a moment to pray for you. Father, we come to you grateful for the roles that we have, the opportunities we have to contribute to your work. It's baffling to me, but I'm grateful that you've chosen to include us in your grand plan and your great purposes. But Lord, I ask that you would give us eyes to see and ears to hear through the din of our daily work so that we can actually recognize the part that we're playing and that we might not feel like these things are busy work, but instead are the contributions to a greater plan. Lord, fill us with a sense of purpose that we might give the best that you've given us to the tasks on our plate. I ask that you'd fill us with big, wise, and worthy work, and that we would serve well, that we'd rise to the level that you called us to, and that we would serve your purposes well. In your name, amen.